For the longest time, when I was a kid, I was an incredibly sensitive person. Practically every negative statement that people said about me caused an emotional reaction, even if it was a joke. You know, I gotta say, teenagers can be pretty damn cruel, especially in a high school setting. And that's really when my sensitive reactions peaked. Growing up, I felt like I was in this weird medium between friend groups. On the one hand, I had my friend group that I didn't go to school with, and when we hung out, we mostly just played video games and smoked bud. We appropriately named ourselves the Weed Kids. And then I had my friend group that I did go to school with, and with this friend group, we were definitely a little more rowdy. This is the friend group that I went to parties with, and we had an extremely cringeworthy group chat name that we named after a fake fraternity that we made up. And we embodied that pretty well, because if I'm being completely honest, we were pretty terrible people as kids. We would constantly get in trouble in school, and bullying was not uncommon. I hate to admit that. Just to give you an even better idea on what this friend group did, at one point they were trying to steal fire extinguishers from every house party that they went to, and it got so bad that I had to hide my own fire extinguisher when they all came over for my annual party that I threw at my parents' house on New Year's Eve. You can kind of understand the type of people that we were. So naturally, when I was with this friend group, the chirps would fly. Insults would be made at each other, but it would always be in a pretty not so serious way. But for some reason, while everybody else could deflect these insults as not a big deal, I would get hurt pretty often. Even though I knew they were joking, I could not seem to quell my emotions. As a result, I felt like I never fully belonged in this friend group. I felt more attuned to the Weed Kids. Don't get me wrong, I love those guys to death. I still do, and we made some amazing memories together, but the shit that they did, sometimes I just couldn't get myself to do. I never got in any fights. I've only gotten in one my entire life, and they got in plenty. They would jokingly poke fun at each other, and I had a harder time doing it. Now at this point, you might think that I'm gonna say that what they did wasn't an actual problem and that I'm in the wrong. That's not what I'm saying at all, actually. I'm not condoning this favor. I'm just trying to show you guys how I was more sensitive than others. And my oversensitivity would start to pose as an even bigger problem later down the line in my life. Once I got into college, I still felt more sensitive than other people. I feel like when I look back on that, I couldn't go more than a month or two without crying about something. Obviously, there's nothing wrong with crying when you need to. You absolutely should when you need to, but when you're crying over that many small things that frequently, there's definitely a problem there. My sensitivity was greatly hindering my ability to do things consistently, because pretty consistently, I just had to pause my life because of how severely something affected me. And so I started to do some research online to see if there were other people struggling with this same thing. And I came across a certain term, and that term was empath. If you don't know, an empath is someone who feels emotions much more highly than other people and is more greatly influenced by words and the energy of a place or person. So I'm thinking, surely this is what I am. I'm an empath. What further reinforced the idea that I was naturally more sensitive than others were the personality traits attached to my astrology sign. If you don't know, Pisces are apparently very sensitive people. Yeah, I know, we're talking about astrology, don't leave a comment. So this is what I identified as, an empathetic Pisces. If you've watched other videos on my channel where I talk about the importance of how much what you consume affects your personality and who you are, you'll know that because I got this validation from the internet to call myself an empath and a more sensitive person, it made me more sensitive than I need to be. But here's the thing, I still do in fact believe that I'm an empath. It's just that other people's insults, inconveniences, and things I don't like no longer cause a serious negative emotional reaction out of me. If you are in college or you're a teenager and you're experiencing this same thing of just being too sensitive to bad things that happen to you, all you need is the sponsor of today's video, which is Vite Ramen. Alright, maybe ramen can't help you with developing strength towards having sensitivity, but Vite Ramen can definitely help people who are extremely busy, who are trying to get a nutritionally complete meal in one packet. If I would have had Vite Ramen in college, it definitely would have saved my ass being so involved in fitness, because it is high protein ramen. It's crazy. The reason I chose Vite Ramen as the first food sponsor of this channel is not only because it's high protein ramen, and that's amazing, but also because their noodles are made in the USA in a small facility in California. And just look at the macros and micronutrients on this thing. Every packet has up to 31 grams of protein, 500 calories, and they are complete proteins with all the amino acids provided by the quinoa. And it's a full meal. It's gonna keep you full for hours. I personally have been eating the vegan white miso. You guys know that I'm vegan, or maybe you don't, on this channel, and it tastes super great. I still just can't believe that these packets have 30 grams of protein in it, and it's ramen. That's just the greatest thing ever. So if you are trying to get high protein, just a complete meal, 500 calories in ramen form, then go to the link in my description and go check out Vite Ramen. All right, so now let's go over some of the ways that I have prevented my sensitivity, being an empath, from really hindering my progress in life. If you are too sensitive and you don't allow for any sort of good criticism because you get hurt too easily, then you will ruin your life. You will never go after what you truly want, and when you fail, you'll be too affected by the failure to continue on. The first thing that I had to do was accept all of my flaws, and this one sentence changed everything for me. Nobody can hurt me without my permission. When my friends in high school used to insult me, what was it that they usually said about me? Sometimes I'd actually get picked on for not wanting to get into the fights that my friends were getting into. This led me to develop the nickname pacifist. At first, this absolutely enraged me. I tried to deny it as much as I possibly could, and I would give them the metaphorical and literal finger. I knew if I wanted to prove to them that I wasn't, then I would have to get into a fight, even though I didn't want to. And what do you know? An opportunity presented itself. We were at this house party and some random drunk kid just came up to me and randomly insulted me. My friend who was standing next to me turns to me and he goes, "Yo, Cole, are you gonna take that?" I completely froze up. I didn't want to fight, and I could barely even hear what that kid said to me. But somehow one thing led to another, and a scrap ensued, but I didn't take any part in it. Not one punch thrown by me. Because of this, I got into a massive argument with the one friend that turned to me after we escaped to the car when we left the party. And I knew at this point I was gonna get endless pacifist insults. But then I just said, fuck it, I'm gonna accept it. I'm going to accept the fact that, yes, I am a pacifist. I try to avoid altercations as much as possible. I don't want to fight people. To this day, I still sometimes get those pacifist jokes thrown at me with those friends, but it no longer has any effect on me. Because I no longer care what anyone has to say about that. That is who I am, and I fully embrace that. And honestly, being a pacifist is not a weakness, and I don't really think it's a flaw, but I thought it was a good example to use. Nobody could hurt me without my permission, and I didn't give them the permission to. I laughed it off with them. You know, I actually have a gap in my front teeth, and one of them is chipped, and you guys have probably noticed this before. People will always say negative stuff about it, and I'll say, hell yeah, I have a gap tooth, I got a chipped tooth, and I love it. That is who I am, and that's why I love it. I'm sure someone's gonna have something to say about my teeth. So you know what? Do your worst in the comments. And yes, I am more sensitive than other people, but paradoxically, accepting and embracing that sensitivity made me less sensitive. But this only applies to those things that you can't change about yourself that are true to yourself. So now let's talk about those other things, the inconveniences, the failures, the rejections of life, and why they no longer create such an intense, sensitive reaction out of me. Here's the other thing I realized. This is the mindset that I adopted. It's that life is not that serious. The people that get overly offended by everything and are greatly impacted by the failures and rejections that they go through take themselves and life way too seriously. You have to remind yourself that this life is a game that we are playing. And yes, it feels very real, but that doesn't make it any less of a game. We've all created characters and acquired different attributes in which all of us are way too heavily identified with. Because I so heavily identified as a Pisces empath, and I would let other people's words hurt me because I didn't accept my flaws, everything would make me emotional. Now, yes, I do know that I'm an empath and I accept that, but I never allow myself to attach to that idea of myself too heavily. Once I loosened the restraints of that identification of myself, it just became a lot easier to deal with negative things. Well, that on top of going through more difficult things to help thicken my skin. Really just think about the bigger picture here for a second, and I hate to use this example, but I'm going to. We are just a bunch of humans floating in space on a rock who decided that we should take this cosmic joke very, very seriously. You know, this is very serious business, we say. We have to have a straight face and think this way and act this way and do all the same things. And if you don't do everything else that everyone else is doing, then you have flaws and we're gonna make fun of you for it. Like, what? Just relax for a second. I try to do this every time I have a video on my channel that flops when I put it out, just like the video that I put out today. The video is tanking and I spent all this time making the script, editing, and recording it. And for a little while, it was hitting me very emotionally, but then I took a step back. I am far, far too attached to this one video, I told myself. All I can think about is how I can make this one video better. I've already changed the title and thumbnail 5 times, but is it really that serious? Is life in general that serious to get worked up about one YouTube video or anything that happens to me that I deem to be negative? I am not giving you permission to point out other people's flaws or insult people. Show respect to people, but know that other people aren't going to respect you and that life is going to throw you failures and rejections. So never get too overly attached to them or too overly attached to an idea of yourself that you have. And when you have a little bit of humor about yourself and your flaws and what people don't want you to be, and you have humor about life in general, it just makes dealing with emotional things that would normally make you sensitive, so much easier to deal with. Thank you to all the patrons on this channel on Patreon. If you don't know what this is, it's a platform separate from YouTube where I'm putting out exclusive videos and podcasts and other content that you can't find anywhere else. If you want to check that out, the link is in the description, patreon.com/Cole Hastings. Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope this helped, and I hope you have a good rest of your day or night.